there was something that was causing friction in the organization. Back to the Church Staff Book Club. My name is Jonathan Malm.
And I'm Jason Young.
And we are talking about a book, The Emotionally Healthy Leader by Peter Scazzero. That's what this podcast is all about. We pick a book for the next however many chapters there are. So 13 chapters, 13 weeks, 9 chapters like this book, 9 weeks. And we take one podcast episode to talk about the chapter. And our hope is that whether you're listening as a team or whether you're listening as an individual, that you will be able to learn together with us, that we can all learn better, we can all contextualize it better, we can all apply it better because we're learning together. We just learn better together. Everything is better when we do it as a team. And that's our hope with this podcast, is that we can do that. So this chapter that we're talking about today is chapter 7. It's really a team building chapter. It's super practical, but it's how do you build an emotionally healthy team and be an emotionally healthy leader? How does your team building actually affect your ability to be an emotionally healthy leader? So it was really good stuff. I liked it. I have a little bit of pushback on some stuff, which might be some good conversation today. But what would you say is like the big thing that you got from this chapter, Jason?
I think sometimes when we lead teams, I've been guilty of this. We think, well, I lead the team, right? And I think what Peter is saying is actually, yes, and you're creating the environment your team lives in. So in other words, maybe this said differently, is who you are becomes the culture. And if you feel the weight of that, you're like, whoa, that was heavy. Exactly. I mean, you're a thermostat. I was talking to my 17-year-old son last night about leadership. He works at Chick-fil-A, and we were just talking about the difference in a thermostat and a thermometer, right? And here, what we're saying is, as a leader, you're a thermostat. You're setting the temperature, and the temp you set, not reflect, but the temp you set, in essence, becomes the culture that the whole team lives inside of.
Yeah. I mean, you see that with, teams that are competitive, teams that are, that work around the clock. It reflects the leader. It reflects what they think the leader is expecting of them. Obviously, there's exceptions to that, right? Like we all bring our own baggage into the team. So, maybe the team is very healthy, very relaxed, and I bring in and I just hustle and I can ruin it. But that's the reality, is that one person can change the dynamic of the whole team, even if they're not the leader, because they have those expectations. So part of this chapter is talking about how do we address those unhealthy behaviors that are negatively affecting the whole team. He opened the idea with this little story. He opened the chapter with this story, the idea of a lamb, a bunch of forest creatures trying to live in the jungle, or in the forest, I guess, rather. And there's a lamb. Then this tiger says, "Hey, friends, I want to live with you. Can I live with you?" And all the animals are like, "Yes, this is great, right?" And the lamb's like, "I'm a little bit concerned here." And everyone's like, "No, it's fine. That's just what tigers do. The tiger's going to be fine." And obviously, we see the writing on the wall of what's going to happen here. But he pitches this idea of cage the tiger, the thing that is going to potentially be consuming your organization, consuming your team, damaging your team, predatory toward your team. Actually caging the tiger instead of letting it run around. Because I think a lot of us, we are maybe a little bit avoidant to, caging someone or caging something that is happening, because it seems very aggressive. It seems very like we are separating something from the organization, which we don't do, right? But he says cage the tiger, and I really liked that. That was something that I loved opening the chapter with.
So in light of that, when we think about kind of the setting, that like you just described, if we think about, a church staff, why do you think leaders, regardless of the role, but why do you think leaders often underestimate the power of culture, like inside the church, not like necessarily culture around them per se?
I don't know if they necessarily undervalue the culture. I mean, I guess some pastors do. Some pastors maybe don't see that their actions result in culture. I think they underestimate the value of culture detractors. Or, I remember we had a pastor that we had on staff. It was, again, a Spanish service, which he talked about in this book. But the idea that there was this something was happening with this leader that was just causing friction in the organization. My dad, who was the pastor, described it as like it was barnacles on the boat. It was just kind of slowly eating away at the structure of the boat. It was slowing us down. It was creating drag. We all kind of felt this like this lack of forward momentum, almost like this lack of inertia or lack of, whatever you want to call it, that was pulling us back. And there was nothing wrong. There was no moral issue. There was no like blatantly obvious like disrespect, whatever it was. But there was something that was causing friction in the organization. And I was proud of my dad that he addressed it. That's where a lot of us are just like, that's just the way it is. That's just the way ministry needs to be. That's just we come to accept the dysfunction, the negative element of the culture. We don't want to address it because it's like, well, in general, the culture is good. Our culture is hardworking. We love each other, all these good things, but we don't want to focus on the thing that, man, it's pulling us back. That's what I would say. I don't know. I mean, there are definitely, I would say, pastors who don't realize their impact on culture. I talked to a pastor recently that like he's like I finally get it, Jonathan. I finally get what you're saying, that like my personality impacts the church. Like, because he thought like, well, we're a team, but like everyone is looking at you, pastor. Everyone is looking at you to see how we should operate, how we should act. We want to please those in authority, and we will get our culture from you.
Yeah. I like the last part of what you said, that sometimes leaders underestimate their impact, right, on culture. Because remember this, culture is what people experience. It's not what you announce. And it's kind of like the old adage, organizations, churches, businesses, it doesn't matter. Many do this right here. They will have values or a cute little statement or, this mission purpose statement, and they'll put it on the wall. They might even mention it, but sometimes the difference in that and the actual culture, like there's distinct differences. I remember working at a church, at a multi-site church. I was there for about 7 years, and what was interesting is in those 7 years, I worked for 4 different leaders in 7 years.
Is that because they couldn't handle you?
Probably. So this is more of an indictment on me.
What are we gonna do
like
with Jason, man?
Yeah, wait a minute. Are you staging an intervention right now and I just don't even know it?
They're all in the room with me right now. They have some things they want to tell you.
Holy moly. That could be an interesting conversation. Oh man, made my heart jump for a quick sec. When I think about those leaders, I think about the organizational values, the church, our values, they stayed exactly the same, but the experience vastly different simply by what you just said.
The things that they said from the pulpit all stayed the same, but the way they all worked out or what actually happened was completely different.
That's right. The values, mission statement, all that stuff stayed the same. And it goes to, it serves as an example to what you just said, that you, the leader, have a significant impact on the culture. And I think about from leader 1 to 2 to 3 to the last leader, which is primarily the reason I left, was because of the last leader. They shape the culture that we experience, not necessarily something they announce. Because again, values and mission statement, exactly the same. But that leader either made things a lot better or made things drastically worse. So it's just interesting, as an example, what you just said, that leaders impact and shape culture.
This is one of the reasons that I am actually pro pastor hiring their kids to be on staff, because there is this like innate consistency that runs through in the culture, because a child is going to be the product of the culture of their household, right? So I noticed, working with my dad, my brother worked with as well, is decisions were easy. Like I knew exactly what my dad would want, and I could largely be consistent with the culture of the organization just because I was his son, right? Like I'm a big fan of that. I know that doesn't always work out. There's really toxic environments of that. Like, I always make the joke on Instagram about like that whenever you're the one person not in the family that joins the staff, and like now you're ostracized because you're not in that group, right? Like there's definitely some unhealth that can come from that, right? But there is also some really cool opportunities that come from that. let's talk about, he kind of gives these four ideas of how do you create an emotionally healthy team, at least how they did at New Life Church, which is, where he was the pastor. But the first one was work performance and spiritual formation are inseparable. So the idea of how you function in your job, but also how you are formed with Jesus, they're both just as important to the organization. Uh, and that's an interesting thing. We that is not something that you would do in any other job, right? Like you don't care about how someone's marriage is going, or you don't care about if they have this secret life on the side, right? Except for if it's like I have a teacher that's in our neighborhood that's like, yeah, they were like doing stuff behind the scenes, like with like they were interested in like kid stuff, horrible things, right? But like as a or no, they were coming to school drunk. That's what it was. Like they were coming to school drunk, and I'm like, was that affecting the teacher? Like, I don't know, like, but like that did affect it because it was in the workplace, right? That's the big deal. But like a lot of like if he gets drunk on Saturday, Saturday, Sunday, and is drunk the whole weekend, nobody cares, right? Like that's in most jobs that doesn't really matter. But we do have the responsibility and leadership as laid out in Paul's letter to Timothy, right? That there are standards for those in ministry that we need to uphold.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying and what Peter Scazzero is saying is leadership flows from the inside out. And I think sometimes we could forget that. I have forgotten that because we think of leadership being what other people see, right? Or what we are doing. And in essence, maybe said a different way, is culture, again, what people experience, not necessarily what the leader announces. It's the overflow of the leader's internal world. And so when you think about that, it's like, well, what's going on in my internal world? Is it full of anxiety? Is it full of calm? Is it full of, you know, that what we've talked about before, Sabbath delight, this loving union, this, or is it constant rush and, lack of trust? So in essence, whatever's being built inside that nobody sees eventually becomes something that most people see and experience at some point. You may pull some trickery for a little bit. And what Scazzero really advocates is, that's not necessary. You set the tone, let God do the inner work, and then he will do something more and deeper in the outer work, right? But sometimes we don't connect those two worlds because the outer work is sexier than the inner work, because the outer work is what people see. Therefore, sometimes we hang out right there, because it's outcome focused. Whereas the internal is, we don't see it that way sometimes.
Well, and so here's my pushback as I was reading this, because he's talking about, this person has this, emotional unhealth that they bring to the team meeting, or this person does this thing. And I just think of this verse though, where it talks about making allowance for each other's faults, right?
Yeah.
And so fulfill
Yeah.
the law of Christ. So how do those mesh though? The idea that like we can't allow people's faults to stay, but we also have to make allowance for it. I mean, I have my theory on how this works out, right? But like, what would you say? That was kind of some of my pushback. I was like, yeah, but like, aren't we supposed to be cool with like, yeah, that's just how so and so is? Like, is that? I mean, that's not really what that verse means, but that's I think often how we kind of interpret it, or that's how we act on it.
Yeah, I don't think Scazzero is saying, and I don't believe personally, that a leader has to have their world in perfect working order to show up and be, their best. Look, we're human. I have challenges, so I might show up to work and, my wife and I see things differently, or my kids just make me think and say things internally that I wish weren't true, or there's that volunteer that you just hope they never show up again because they're exhausting, right? Or a staff member, or maybe it's your supervisor, so there are a lot of things that create sometimes internal conflict. And I think that's okay. I think that we do give allowance and grace to each other. I also think that we have to be mindful, this is where the self-awareness piece comes in. It's kind of like these mirror moments I can hold up and, this is what I see, that I have to make sure that those things don't have a negative impact long term on the team, on the church, on my volunteers, right? So there is a humanity part of who I am, and you give grace to me. And there's an awareness that I have to be mindful of, that it's not negatively impacting and costing the church staff, the volunteers, the church as a whole, something. So I do think that there is this balance, to maybe isn't the right word, but there's an awareness on all of our parts that, let me say it differently. Sorry, I'm a verbal processor. So if
Yeah.
you're listening, you're real time hearing Jason's brain, which, sorry about that. That phrase, well, just check your blank at the door, check your baggage, check your whatever at the door. Yeah. And then you're going to show up and be this ideal person that we need, which is often lunacy, because like the person is a person, right? And
It's
so
kind of a lack of integrity of like, be a different person at work than you are at home, kind of again.
absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
in essence, that's what it's saying. And I think the church or businesses do this too, is they protect themselves because they don't want you to show up as your authentic self. Now, the danger is, it's like, what is that authentic self? Is it unpredictable? So I think there's a balance that you show up as your authentic self, and you realize I have to be mindful from a self-awareness perspective and how I choose to manage it, what I do, what I say, and I have to measure impact on the team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think where I came to peace with it is because, this was the first section was, work performance and spiritual formation are inseparable. The second section was the elephants in the room get acknowledged. So
Mm.
don't pretend like something isn't happening. And these sections kind of largely felt the same because, he was talking about someone's, gruffness in a meeting. And then the second section he talked about again someone's gruffness in the meeting. We're going to address it. But what he painted the picture of, and I think this is really where I like it, is that we are going to acknowledge the things that need to change in you. But it's not
Yes.
going to be a matter of, sorry, you're a barnacle on the boat, we're going to cut you loose. Instead, it's saying, hey, we're going to come alongside you and we're going to walk with you as you mature in this area. And so
Yeah.
he painted the picture of the idea of working with some people for multiple months, spending 8 hours a day preparing for this one meeting where he needed to address the elephant in the room. The idea that you go into this with fear and trembling, you go into this with sacrificial Jesus kind of love, where you say, okay, this is your fault that I see. We're going to make an allowance for it in the way that we're going to come alongside you and we're going to help you submit that to Jesus. We're going to help you mature that thing that needs maturing. And I was like, that's where it is, which changed my perspective on that verse. The idea that make allowance for each other's faults is like, oh yeah, that's just Jim. He's always angry. He's always gonna like react to everything we say, right? Instead of like, hey Jim, I love you, man. Let's work on that. We don't need that in your life anymore. And I'm going to sacrifice my time. I'm going to sacrifice my productivity. I'm going to sacrifice my vision to be able to make allowance for your fault and come alongside you and carry you to Jesus, that's a totally different. And again, that's very contrary to our current hustle culture where it's like, we got to produce, and it's like, what if you slowed down to make an allowance for this person's fault, not ignoring the fact that it exists, but actually helping them carry it to Jesus?
Well,
That's a big responsibility.
absolutely. And recently I built this 8-hour workshop on feedback and how feedback really is a leadership practice, but a lot of times we don't practice it for a variety of reasons. I won't unpack everything here, but it reminds me of the example that you just gave, because a lot of times we'll just say, oh, that's just, Jim, that's just Sally, and kind of overlook it and move on, but it has an impact, right? But what's interesting on the feedback side of things is sometimes we don't, because we want the status. We don't want to ruffle feathers. We want to, quote unquote, keep peace. We don't want to be looked at that person. But when you're building this culture, intentionally building a healthy culture, one of the things that I've noticed that healthy cultures have leaders who are willing to be courageous enough to share feedback. They are, or I shouldn't say that. Let me work this out. They're confident enough to share feedback. And this is the part that many leaders don't do, that can be an accelerant for your leadership and your culture, the courage to ask for it, but it requires the third part, maturity to receive it. So when you think about the culture you're trying to create, I'm going to be confident to, we don't have time to unpack how do you do this feedback, but maybe in another episode, but I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to model it because this culture of helping each other and feedback and things of that nature, it only goes as far as your willingness to ask and receive it. It's not noble that you ask, it's noble and mature that you receive it and that you're willing to do something with it. So when we think about building a healthy culture on purpose, this would be an example of how you can do that as a leader.
Yeah, I think it also there's this tendency in life to create these dichotomies. So we are, I feel like a lot of people in ministry are like, we either are the culture of no feedback and no, we don't address the elephants in the room, or we're a culture of addressing every elephant in the room, saying that was bad, that was bad, that was bad, criticizing everything. But there's a third option where it is, it's almost like the covenant approach to marriage, right? Where it's like, you failed in the contract, but I'm going to step up and walk us through it and fulfill that part of the contract together as a covenant, right? So like, there's the culture with now we're going to walk through this with you to help you. We're all going to suffer together to help you get to where you need to be, because that's the team is going to get there, right? It's not just like you are a weakness to the team. It's like our team is weak. Let's all go together. It is again, a carrying to Jesus type of approach, which is not usually the case because we're so married to speed that we're like, this person's just not going to be able to keep up. We got to cut them loose. And that doesn't feel very in line with Jesus's teachings and Paul's teachings in the New Testament, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is very much like, let's make allowance for each other's faults again. So I love that. And another thing that Peter said was that time and energy are invested. And here's something I've been thinking about lately, and I don't know that a lot of people agree with this, but I think that churches probably have no business hiring specialists until they reach over 1,000 people in attendance every week. And what I mean is, instead, what they should be hiring is pastors, meaning people who will care. Because what specialists do is they spend 80% of their time designing the graphic, doing the website, doing social media, all of these like very specialized tasks, right? But instead, I would say you should be hiring pastors who are more focused on developing people until you're over 1,000 people, because at that point, then you have, this economies of scale where you have these people that can actually care for people, and there's not as many people that are expecting to get cared for, right? Like, but up until that point, like, we should be pastoring our volunteers. And the volunteers are likely the ones who will be doing the actual specialist work, right? But instead, we're pastoring them, we're leading them, we're equipping them. That's kind of something, I don't know how you think about what you think about that, but it's something I posted on social media the other day, and I'm like, I don't know, I think I agree with this, but I'd never thought about it until that moment.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm smart enough to chime in on something like that. I mean, yeah, maybe so. I mean,
No,
your
I need a decision
justification.
right now, Jason.
Yeah, I could probably give you something and it would be really wrong. I mean, there could be some merit. I think your thoughtful justification is sensible.
Yeah, there's
For
exceptions to
sure.
that. I'd say this is
Yeah,
like a general rule.
yeah, for sure. And look, what Jonathan and I know is you want to get your leadership right. You want to get culture right. Um, but it's hard. But I think you don't have to figure it out on your own. We hope like this podcast or other resources, or maybe you have a community of other leaders that God's placed you where you are for such a time as this. And he wants you to intentionally create the healthiest possible culture, not allow the culture to accidentally be created. Right. So, and that's something big to own. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have a real answer for that, but I think it's a worthy thought.
Yeah, because I think the idea again is that we are investing time and energy into spiritual formation, into all of these things, into addressing helping you address the elephant in the room. And there was another part in the section where he was talking about, a staff member that uh, kind of did a fireable offense. Like and he again spent a lot of time preparing for this conversation with the staff member, and he addressed the ideas like, this is what needs to change in your life. If you can't change this, we would need to fire you. Even saying like, in many organizations this would be a fireable offense, but let's work on this together. And I just think about, one time I got fired. It wasn't really fired. It was like the organization was getting rid of this branch, and they loved me, but they had no longer had a place for me in the organization, right? So, but I was telling my dad about that, and he said something. He's like, Jonathan, kind of glad you got fired. I feel like everyone needs to get fired one time in their life. And I'm like, and like, that's a horrible thing to say to your son, right? But I know my dad. He was saying, like, I am excited for what this is going to do in your formation as an individual, as a
Yeah.
person. And the idea that sometimes we think of firing, we think of, confronting, we think of these things as negative things, like that's going to hurt them. But whenever you start realizing that it's, it is the chisel that creates the diamond, right? That creates the value in the diamond. It is that friction that creates the value in so many of us, that we can actually do that in a loving way that is actually the best thing for them. And by not exposing the facet of their diamond, if you will, we're actually being unloving. And I really love that idea that, like, if we're investing the time and energy to help them become what God has created them to be, that is the most loving thing it can be, especially whenever we're applying that pressure and applying that friction and that, that confrontation.
Yeah, I will agree with you. I've gotten fired and laid off, and both were formative for me. And actually, what I didn't see at the time is God was protecting me from what I couldn't see, and ended up being, so to your point, really helpful. Didn't feel great in the
Yeah.
moment, but
No.
helpful.
I mean, there's a verse,
Situations.
right? Discipline doesn't feel good in the moment, but in the end, it produces a good harvest, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you a quick question. I know time is dwindling. So if people are listening and they're like, okay, this healthy team, this culture thing, I hear what you're talking about. What are some descriptives, some adjectives, if you will, of what a healthy culture looks like? What are the signs I should look for or have as a target? What would be some of those words?
They'd probably align a lot with New Testament verbiage, where it's, considering others more highly than yourselves. It would be helping people carry the load. It would be the encouragement element. It would be the helping people maintain internal perspective. It would be resting, Sabbath, the celebration of rest, or the celebration of health. Celebrating things that maybe are not healthy for the organization, but that are healthy for the individual, actually celebrating those. Celebrating failure, I'd say would be one. Not moral failure, but celebrating, like, hey, you took a risk, you tried something. That's awesome. Like celebrating innovation, I would say. Maybe that's not in the New Testament, but I do think there are a lot of churches that don't celebrate failure, and because of that, they don't celebrate innovation. So I would say that's one. I don't know. What would you say? You're probably better. You run a lot of these meetings in organizations where you're talking about these type of culture builders.
I like all this. I love the innovation part. In fact, a book, if anybody's interested, it's a business book. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, but he goes by VG. It's his initials. He is a distinguished professor of business at Dartmouth. He's been there almost 50 years, and so I was at a gig with him recently. But he has a book called The Three Boxed Solution, or Three Box Solution, something like that. But it's interesting. So it could be worth the read around innovation, because it's a different way to think about it. So I love that word he said. Anyways, little side note there. I don't make any commissions on books, by the way, we recommend. But there you go. I would add some of what we already talked about, Jonathan: honesty, vulnerability, trust, boundaries, feedback, right? And how we handle conflict. I know Scazzero talks about leaders and teams that avoid conflict. What does healthy conflict look like? And I would say that is one piece. I think healthy cultures do well, healthy leaders do well, because I think in an attempt to build a great culture, sometimes we could be tempted to avoid conflict. But
Yeah.
when you avoid conflict, you actually weaken the culture. And so I would say those plus, things that you just said.
Healthy conflict is one of those, like, it feels like an oxymoron, but it's
Right.
actually a very true statement. You when you have, a staph infection, you need to get it out, and it's an uncomfortable, yucky process, but it's a healthy conflict because you're getting out the thing that would cause decay and dysfunction in your body. So, yes. So we hope this episode was helpful. Next chapter is chapter 8. We're getting 2 more chapters of this book, and we'll move on to the next one. Probably need to start deciding what book we're going to be doing next.
Yeah,
But
true.
hey, we hope this was helpful for you. We'll see you next week. Make sure and subscribe if you haven't already. Find us on social media. We love talking about this stuff, but we'll see you next week.